where the verb itself is used for the reason of its self meanings represents the combinations of its definitions. It is the requisition. Now, what I just said is already a formula ready to be put in place, but it will be my letters and numbers when the proper time comes. So let's move on. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Already in its additions, ready to be used in any method. Sub is and or in with its other word to be used to represent that word in how it's used. Substitution is the same as subdividing with more and greater purpose.
Subdividing and dividing run the same chorus, but with subdividing goes on to break it down more of its situation. Substitution and is the action of separating parts and or processes of the situations into divisions and or situations of divisions is a set of circumstances of its state and affair, with circumstances being facts in, of, about, in any kind of events, conditions, surroundings in the particular situations. It is in requisition, substitution, intervention. That's what's happening and the influencing how the reactions and or reaction in its processes and or situations. And in this case, we talk about chess.
Set of circumstances. Number 1 is the totaling of surroundings, conditions, and events that affect a situation. Number 2, the information provided. Chess, contents, meaning, and understanding of the different parts in all aspects that are broken down and the continuations of subdividing the circumstances of and in its events into divisions of its situations. Subsituations. Number 3 is the influences from the circumstances that has the significant impact on the outcome and or the way of the procedures reveals its actions in the situations. So, let the chief and head programmer show you a true insight since 2005. Understanding a situation starts at its underlying and is the subdividing, identifying the reasons of characters, events, and conditions that represents the combinations of definitions that needs to be described to the reason it was intended is important into what shapes the meanings of effects and or influences of and or in the situations of and with something else to be of in being explicit itself.
Intervention of a situation of itself, numbers missing in the weight of the balance. A. Expression that describes optical illusion of a understanding in the situation, to be seen of comparance only, to understand the differences which is the distance and range of a complex perception and the numbers not understood within and of its whole situation, is a perception is in being misled by the visual stimulus. 1. Perceive a stimulus and initiate all actions, all things that only remain. 2. A system predicts an object's trajectory and moves the situation accordingly to see individual paths. 3. The understanding of give and take to compensate, to, from, between, and for to get the differences, subsituations. Subsituation constant in more than one direction, which is subdividing. Divisions is separating the situations and is in exchange of, with, and or in combinations of itself in the structures of valued objects in their own paths of constant and valued objects in a non-deterministic and or in combinations of that, starting at their starting points to move forward only. And there in 2800 in 2005, weight of the balance holds all tactics and is the constant remaining with no change in their paths.
Subsituation deterministic. In 2005, 2800, terminally defeated, came the change, shift, for the new underlying, from and to the cause. And there is your fluctuating, which is change, shifting, is the source, the strategy, and the time to fit in the position right into the situation of deterministic, but by and from time and time to fit in the position for the weight of the balance, and not just from the opening only, but all cases in any positions for and or from into the deterministic outcomes.
Subsituations, constant and deterministic into combinations. Now, between what was and what became reveals the differences, meaning 2800 in its tactics is in its constant, that from that level down has all its actions, paths, and when compared and revealed every starting point to start for each direction of each of its paths, stay in constant at from two individual points that carry their numbers along with its non-deterministic moves right into the situation and of the point of change of the 2800 permanently defeated, not just for the weight of the balance to be seen, but where the happening of in the center on the fifth move in the opening was not just for the control.
In the weight of the balance of the board, it also became the new underlying and all of its time and timing to fit from to for in with of all situations with the center, position, control of the board into the new regulating deterministic moves and get the understanding of the differences of before, during, after, started and works in the deterministic with total continuations, now along with constant for the two features that one was into what became as one, where all paths run together, but between the two comparisons is seen in its differences, that the center gave the direction of the distal directions, for each path to be understood and see what was really happening in constant.
Notice all sacrifices is all a part of the time to fit in the position, and any sacrifices, the closest or the furthest, is only qualifying for the level according to the distal of the weight of the balance that its outcome has achieved. Constant has no change. Notice, no matter how many times a constant starting point is used to start a new path order, the direction that it heads is the action of its reality in its state and quality of creating its only actual existence with no change.
Distal is the situated away from the center and or the point, and is the opposite of proximal and or of attachment and or the situation of itself. And this is where we understand constant of its locations and or structures is in each of its paths of its own body to the point and or points to the origins that it can only be with no change in before, during, and after, while being in the process, and from this we take each one and subdivide for into divisions. Now we understand that constant is opposite of proximal, but does both play a part and a part in these paths for each of their reasons, and therein is the differences to be divided along with its non-deterministic.
Constant paths, distal. Each path is structurally designed to start within itself and end from one of the distal points. But the difference between them all is the greatest is closer to the center and the least is the furthest from the center, which means that the center runs for to in with all actions and holds all its outcomes. Notice that no matter how close a distal point appears to be close to the center, that is still only qualified to be that level, for still all our structurally paths are designed to be within themselves, where, 2, 4, in any possibilities of paths that may or may not be equal with no change, and travels its directions in constant.
To be greater or lesser or equal along with non-deterministic is where we see the weight of the balance from the moves being made to determine the level of the outcome and not for the win or loss and or equal to be for the number for the game player that should be given or taken depending on the circumstances and the weight of the balance. Notice the furthest away into distal is not enough time to fit in the position. For the true discovery, the time to fit in the position is deterministic.
Deterministic paths, distal, but yet in combinations with constant, can be done one of two ways. Is the 2800 complete and start at the clock to force the time of the positions and just continue in this way to its fullest until nothing but deterministic regulating moves, or take each path of constant but making changes before, during, after each move and or positions in any kind of situations it's in, and from this we understand each path is structurally designed to start within itself deterministic and to end from one of the distal points, where all paths in deterministic from the least to the greatest are all distal points, but the differences between them all is the
greatest is closer to the center and the least is the furthest from the center. And this is the new lane and was in 2005 the new underlying of and from of all paths of 2800 in constant to deterministic in combinations. Notice that no matter how close a distal point in deterministic appears to be closer to the center that is not, it still only qualifies to be that level, for it is still all our structurally paths are designed to be within themselves into the deterministic, where 2, 4, in any possibilities of paths that may or may not be equal, but still travels its direction in one of the deterministic distal points in the deterministic to be greater or lesser indeterministic and or
to the point of only doing and keeping regulating deterministic moves until the end for all total weight of the balance and the outcome of the level for the game or player, regardless of the win or loss. Notice the furthest away into distal is not enough time to fit in the position in deterministic. 2005 started the change to advance deterministic and continue on in changes that kept growing to have the deterministic distal points that shows the true value of the deterministic.
Part 3 in the cornerstone of chess.
We show a demonstration of constant and uncover distal points and program features
that may be done in combination.
but I'll decide when I take these actions.